a lot of what we talked about focus on online journalism, obviously, and so I would like to know, as well as the other SPJ members, do you think that it's time for schools to start leaning towards having more courses focusing on online journalism? And yeah, let's just go with that one.
Yes.
Never ask a question with get too simple an answer to, right? Yeah, indeed. In fact, what you're having, I mean, you can talk about convergence if you want, but literally, when we mentioned you need to develop all the skills, it isn't just a course online, it's a course where you're doing all those things. So the Cleveland State Online, for example, someone here must be helping to do that. Quite clearly, we need to integrate that. I would argue that we need to integrate the downstairs, that's the studio, the radio and television folks together with the print folks and the online folks. That's the convergence we're talking about, and that's the set of skills you need to do, because you might be asked to do all of those things.
I'm on the board of the Medill School at Northwestern, and one of the things that I've been really impressed with there over the last few years is how much that curriculum has been remade to reflect the modern reality. The whole push there has been, what kind of skills do people need to have to arm themselves to go into the job market, both right now and in the future? And so what that really means is figuring out, we got to teach people how to write and how to think, and how to have the good journalistic values that we always have, but then we need to arm them with tactics to succeed. And that couldn't be more important, telling stories across platforms.
Yes, the answer, to take the answer to Faith's question. And, it's interesting what Susan said about how the interns have been helpful to plain dealer reporters. I had to learn to use Blogger about 2 years ago, was it last year? Yeah, I learned to use Blogger last year. I'm a little embarrassed to say. But then, because I sort of assumed that young people are so digitally knowledgeable, I've been surprised at how many interns I had to teach to use Blogger. So if you walk in being able to do that already, that's great. Our interns all know how to Google. They're quite good at pulling up information off the internet at a fast rate. But the more online skills you can have, the better.
Yes and yes. I echo everyone's sentiments here. It's just that element of being able to do more and adapt your skills to the technology, whether that be web development, web redesign. Content is king.
Okay, now we can go to the Q&A. If anyone has questions, just raise your hand and you ask questions to get an answer.
Seems like the journalists will be able to adapt what you're saying. You're always going to have people that collect the information or are able to talk and do things like that. What about all the other jobs involved in print media? The people that are working on the presses, or the people making the actual paper, or there's all of these jobs that go into print media. Is there any plan for those people? If the doomsday does occur,
The question, if everybody couldn't hear it, was what's going to happen to all the people who are not the print journalists, who aren't the journalists, who say work at the Plain Dealer or other large print publications? I think that's a real good question. As the number of papers that we print gets smaller, and it will continue to be smaller while our online traffic goes, that means that we might need fewer printers. That said, our presses print lots of other products besides the Plain Dealer, and so there's a way to bring in more work. But I think that the business model is very challenged, because if you think about what a newspaper actually does, it's got intellectual property in two areas. It really has relationships with its readers and its news sources, and so producing the content of the newspaper is one thing, and the other is relationships with its advertisers. And so the things that make a newspaper distinct, or make a newspaper distinct, are those two things: giving information to readers and then having relationships with advertisers. So there's an awful lot that goes on in a newspaper that has nothing to do with that, and a lot of papers have tried to shed costs by getting rid of those functions. Hence you see the Detroit paper only delivering 3 days a week. You've seen other papers close and go on online only. So as the model gets under siege, the two functions that newspapers will seek to retain are its intellectual content and its relationship with advertisers, and they're going to try to shed those other costs.
Another question?
Let me throw in there, there's no one here for television broadcasting. Cameramen lost a lot of their jobs many years ago. Remember the robots? And so you've had the same thing across all industries. It isn't just print. Radio, what happened to radio? How much is local today, folks? Where do you get the local news? So you've had a lot of consolidation in other media that we sometimes forget. It isn't just print that's downsized in that sense. So it's a question of cutting costs. It's the economic model, and even though we talk about the reduction in circulation, which still mystifies me a little bit, being an old timer here, the minute I found out that classifieds were going to the web, I thought papers were in trouble because that was 2/3 of the income. You just knew it. The economic model was changing, and the audience hadn't changed as fast as the economic model. When the May companies and downtown department stores disappeared, there's a whole lot of advertising that disappeared. You can just look at it. So it's changes in society that have nothing to do with our need for news in a sense that also upset the economic model here and trying to figure out what to do with that. And the other is, what do poor advertisers do today in terms of cost? You got to think, the advertising is also a message. I mean, I'm a journalist, but the advertising is also a message, and how do you get it out there and targeting it? And ironically, I heard from one small paper that they were inheriting some advertisers who, because they couldn't afford it anymore, had moved down to less expensive publications. So that, there's still going to be a need for reaching audiences. And I talked with a former student who owns a PR firm now, said that, Leo, they're just rushing towards the web with no research, no idea whether or not it's working or not. And that he just had a client who had shifted all their advertising a year or two earlier to the web. And at the end of that said, we didn't get anything for this. And they're moving back to traditional media. So don't just expect this to be a linear one-way street. There's going to be a lot of experimentation, and not everything's going to work. And there's what's called the novelty effect, and there's a lot of that going on right now, I think, too, as things sort them out. Remember that every medium that ever was in existence is with us today. A man wrote a book talking about the demise of the book. Well, that was 25 years ago. I used that book, by the way. He had the misfortune of dying after he made his prediction. And here we find, I remembered that because 25 years later, people still talk about the end of the book. And I'm one of those who buys hardcovers because they're easier to read in bed. So some things will be around. It's just a question of fragmentation and niches.